There are thousands of players that play professional sports every year. Only a fraction of those will ever be relevant. But one of the most interesting phenomenons is that of the one-hit wonder. Athletes work unthinkably hard and long hours to be the best at what they do. But inside that top 0.01% of athletes is an even smaller group of players, one which manages to surpass any expectations assigned to them. But these players only do it for a short period of time. They eventually fall back down to earth, writing history as just a minor statistical oddity. They become a conversation topic. Hey, remember so-and-so who played for this team at this time? Whatever happened to him? There's often a derogatory theme associated with the term one-hit wonder. People often view it as a bad thing. Why is that? This is the art of the one-hit wonder.
Insanity continues here at Madison Square Garden as the undrafted point guard from Harvard electrifies MSG once again as the Knicks win their fourth in a row.
Mayo here, he tries to make the play, but Peyton Hillis has too much speed once he gets on the perimeter.
In the United States, the Super Bowl reigns supreme. It's the biggest game in the biggest sport in the United States, so fans expect big performances from big players on big teams. And so we start our exploration in Glendale, Arizona for Super Bowl 46 between the New England Patriots and New York Giants. By all accounts in this game, the Giants are underdogs. Patriots finished the regular season 16-0, beating the Jaguars and Chargers on the way to the Super Bowl. The Giants, on the other hand, didn't even win their division. They finished 10-6 with a rocky end of the season. Fast forwarding to the end of the game, and the Giants have the ball trailing 4 points with about a minute left. It's 3rd and 5 about midfield, and Eli Manning's on the verge of getting sacked. He spins away, throws the ball downfield to David Tyree, resulting in one of the most memorable plays in NFL history. But David Tyree was never supposed to be in this spot. In fact, earlier in the game, just 10 minutes before, he had caught a touchdown pass, only the 5th touchdown of his career. Now, in the biggest moment of his life, he had 3 catches for 43 yards and a touchdown, including the 2 biggest plays of the game so far. But David Tyree was kind of a nobody because he had only had 5 total games throughout his career with over 40 receiving yards. He had made a Pro Bowl as a special teamer, and really nothing beyond that. By no account was David Tyree supposed to make these plays. But here he was, holding the ball against his helmet. Okay, let's backtrack just a little bit. Surely during the regular season he had some sort of performances to indicate that this was coming, that he was due for a breakout. No. During the first 2 weeks of the season, David Tyree was inactive. In week 3, he had 0 catches and 0 yards. That was the case for weeks 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. In week 12, he had 2 catches for 32 yards, and then he continued right back, getting 0 catches for 0 yards in week 14, being inactive in weeks 15 and 16, before catching 2 more passes in week 17 for only 3 yards. In fact, David Tyree was the 12th leading receiver on the Giants that year. A current day comparison would be Dennis Houston on the Dallas Cowboys. Houston was the Cowboys' 12th leading receiver this year, a year which they finished 5th in the NFC. Do you know who Dennis Houston is? Because I don't, and probably most Cowboys fans don't either. Yet David Tyree was arguably the reason the Giants won this Super Bowl. It wasn't a performance that really anybody could have foreseen. Not myself, not Tom Coughlin, not Eli Manning. Yet here he was, having the best game of his life in the biggest game of his life. Okay, so if David Tyree wasn't relevant before this catch, surely he became at least a solid player after, right? Well, not exactly. In 2008-2009, he missed the entire season due to a knee injury. And after being picked up by the Ravens the year after, he didn't record a single catch, meaning this catch, the one that he caught on his helmet in the Super Bowl against an undefeated Patriots team, was the last of his career. There's something poetic about this catch. It's almost as if David Tyree's sole purpose, in the NFL at least, was to make this catch. I mean, just look at this Google search trends chart. There's David Tyree's name when people Googled him. There's the initial surge when he made the helmet catch, and then there's a second surge when Julian Edelman made his catch. Poetic, right? I mean, people don't even remember that he scored a touchdown just 10 minutes earlier, with 11 minutes remaining in the game, for the Giants to take the lead. Nobody remembers that, because David Tyree made this play right here. In fact, he had more yards in this Super Bowl than he did in the entire regular season. But that's what makes him a one-game wonder. Our next story brings us to the mecca of basketball, Madison Square Garden, to talk about Jeremy Lin, a reserve point guard on the New York Knicks. The Jeremy Lin story is one that's fairly well documented. He came from a family of Taiwanese immigrants, found himself at Harvard playing basketball, and eventually went undrafted in 2010. He spent a year with the Warriors before signing with the New York Knicks as a reserve point guard. Now, one thing I want to make clear here is that Jeremy Lin wasn't somebody that was expected to get minutes. He was on the back end of this New York Knicks roster, and quite frankly, he was close to getting cut. This Knicks roster wasn't really something to behold. It had Carmelo Anthony, but the Knicks were still pretty not great. They didn't necessarily have contender expectations. A modern day comparison could be Jamal Cain, who plays small forward for the Miami Heat. I'm guessing that you don't know who that is, because I didn't before I was researching this video. That brings us to Madison Square Garden on February 4th, 2012. The 9-15 Knicks are matched up against the 8-17 New Jersey Nets. A little into the first quarter, Mike D'Antoni, the coach of the Knicks, calls to the bench. Jeremy Lin gets ready to go into the game. The first quarter is dry. He gets a rebound and an assist, and not much else. But the second quarter is really when things started to pick up. He almost immediately got a bucket. He was creating assists for teammates, and he was also grabbing rebounds. By the time halftime rolled around, he had 6 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. In the fourth quarter, Lin caught fire. He hit 5 of 7 buckets, and the Knicks, who were trailing in the third quarter by 2, would end up winning the game by 7. Sparked by Jeremy Lin's contributions. In total, Lin played 36 minutes off the bench. He was 10 for 19 from the field, 5 of 7 from the line, had 5 rebounds, 7 assists, and 2 steals. Undermanned at point guard, there was no way the Knicks weren't going to start Jeremy Lin, at least the next game. And he had another strong performance, this time 28 points and 8 assists against the Utah Jazz. He kept going though. 2 games later, the Knicks would play against the Los Angeles Lakers at MSG. That team had Kobe Bryant and Pau Gasol. The Lakers had a 15-12 record, and this game would be televised on ESPN. Lin came out swinging. He scored 4 buckets in the first quarter for a total of 10 points, also recording 3 assists and 1 steal. Now, I want to set a little bit more context here. New York is the number 1 media market in the United States. Los Angeles is number 2. These are the 2 most popular teams in the NBA. This was a big game with big-time players, none of which were bigger than Kobe Bryant, who at this point was a 13-time All-Star. Alright, so now we're back to the game, and by halftime, Jeremy Lin still was putting up numbers. He had 18 points at this point. But the second half would be really when he cemented his legacy. In the third quarter, Jeremy Lin had 9 points, but it was still a relatively close game, so no lead was safe here, especially against a Kobe Bryant team. So going into the fourth quarter, Jeremy Lin still needed to keep it up. That's exactly what he did. He had an 11-point fourth quarter on 7 shots. The Knicks held on to beat the Lakers 92-85. So Jeremy Lin, with his 38 points and 7 assists, was the biggest star of the night in a game that featured the New York Knicks, Los Angeles Lakers, Kobe Bryant, Pau Gasol. Jeremy Lin was the biggest. All in all, this stretch would last 2-3 more weeks after this, but Jeremy Lin wouldn't be able to keep it up. He just wasn't that type of player. He wasn't a volume scorer for a big team, especially one that really wanted to win. And he would manage to put together a really solid career playing for the Rockets, Lakers, Hornets, Nets, Hawks, and even winning a championship with the Toronto Raptors. He was a really solid role player. He just never quite managed to put together a full season where he scored the way that he did for the Knicks during that time. But that's what made Linsanity so special, that a player, any player, could do that on that big of a stage. That's what made Jeremy Lin a one-hit wonder.
As the undrafted point guard from Harvard electrifies MSG once again as the Knicks win their 4th in a row.
There are millions of people that played Madden every single year. Cover athletes have ranged from Odell Beckham to Calvin Johnson, Richard Sherman, Tom Brady. But there's one that really sticks out in the history of Madden covers. Peyton Hillis was a fullback / running back for the Cleveland Browns for a few seasons in the early 2010s. Now, the Browns don't really have much notoriety in the NFL. They've been very bad for a very long period of time. So having a player whose face was the cover of the Madden game was pretty big for them back then. But how did Hillis even get to this point? I mean, he only had 1,100 total yards throughout his college career for Arkansas. And he played 2 seasons for the Broncos, but didn't really do much for them either. Hillis eventually was traded to the Browns in a deal that also involved quarterback Brady Quinn. There were some mild expectations for Hillis, but when the season began, he was listed as both a tight end and fullback, and pretty buried in the depth chart. Throughout his first 2 weeks in Cleveland, Hillis had 76 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's good for running back, nothing too special. But what came after that is where he really surprised people. In a Week 3 contest against the Baltimore Ravens, Hillis had 22 carries for 144 yards and a touchdown. To this point in his career, he hadn't done anything even remotely close to that. So for him to have this type of performance really put him on the radar. A week later, the Browns would play the Bengals, where Hillis rushed the ball 27 times for 102 yards and a touchdown. It was Cleveland's first win of the year, and Hillis was gaining some momentum. He was gaining popularity as well. Now, this Browns team was not very good. They started 3 quarterbacks over the course of the season: Colt McCoy, Jake Delhomme, and Seneca Wallace. They combined for a total of 5 wins throughout the year. Hillis was the focal point of the offense, and when he couldn't get going, the Browns couldn't get going. Hillis would have 2 performances in particular that would really stick out. In Week 12, the Browns would take on the Carolina Panthers, who are at the bottom of the league. Peyton Hillis had an excellent game. Panthers could not stop him in pretty much any way. He scored 3 touchdowns on 26 carries to go along with 131 ground yards. Jake Delhomme, then with the Browns, had 245 yards with 2 interceptions, one of which was a pick 6. Peyton Hillis was basically the only offense that the Browns had in this game, much like the rest of the season. The Panthers were manned by Jimmy Clausen, who's arguably one of the worst quarterbacks in NFL history to start the most of a season. Despite it being a terrible game by both sides, it came down to Hillis' performance, one that really cemented the win for Cleveland. The Panthers would drive in the final minutes of the game only to miss a field goal. The Browns won 24-23. 21 of those points came directly from Hillis touchdowns. But even before this game, 3 weeks earlier, the Browns took on the New England Patriots. Now, before I tell you what happened in the game, I just want to let you know that there's no catch here. This Patriots team was good. They were 6-2. The Browns only had 3 wins by contrast. It had Tom Brady, Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, Rob Gronkowski, the whole 9 yards. But the Browns still managed to do something interesting here, and largely because of what Hillis was able to do in this game. Early on, it was clear that the game plan was to give Peyton Hillis the ball and see what he could do. He scored a touchdown only 5 minutes into the game to give the Browns a 10-0 lead. They kept giving him the ball, and by the time it was the fourth quarter, he had about 120 yards. Then, with less than 2 minutes to go in the game, he broke off a 35-yard touchdown. This gave the Browns a 34-14 lead over the Tom Brady-led New England Patriots. That Patriots team would go on to finish 14-2, only upended by the New York Jets in the playoffs, a team led by Mark Sanchez. So after Hillis had this ultra-impressive season, he became a part of the Madden tournament, one which would decide who was the cover athlete of the game the next year. It used to be this sort of big spectacle. They would have fans in there when they announced the finalists, and it used to be a big production. Hillis in the tournament would win the fan vote in every single one of his games, beating Ray Rice, Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, and finally Michael Vick. That made Peyton Hillis the cover of Madden 12. After that season, though, Hillis wouldn't ever quite be the same. He was still in the NFL. He played for the Browns again, for the Chiefs, but he would really just be immortalized by that Madden cover. He's in a group of players that features Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, Richard Sherman, Drew Brees, Calvin Johnson, Brett Favre, and so many other NFL legends. So his season will always be remembered because of that. It will be remembered because of what he was able to do and how he stuck out in that particular year. He had a phenomenal season, he just wasn't able to keep it up long term. Of one-hit wonders, Peyton Hillis was a one-hit wonder. Earlier, I spoke about how one-hit wonders have a negative connotation. I would argue that they're something beautiful. They change legacies, lives, and conversations around players. David Tyree is immortalized. We see his catch so often. Jeremy Lin did so much for the Asian American community, and he made himself a career in the process. Peyton Hillis' image is in millions of households via the cover of Madden. His image is one that is instantly recognizable to younger NFL fans. And this next one-hit wonder, he'll be remembered forever. In 2016, Cal State Bakersfield had 5,000-1 odds to win the NCAA tournament. They were a 15 seed and were eliminated in the first round. In 2015-16, Leicester City, an English Premier League club, had 5,000-1 odds to win the entire league. They did win it. To say that Leicester City was a one-hit wonder would be an understatement, quite frankly. They should have never won that championship. They should have never been in a position to win that championship. Premier League is not designed for Leicester City to win. The Premier League is designed for teams like Manchester City, Manchester United, and Liverpool, and teams with money, teams that spend. Leicester City didn't do any of that. In fact, this team wasn't really even supposed to be near the middle of the pack. Okay, so basically in English soccer, if you finish among the 3 worst teams in the Premier League, you get kicked out. They replace you with different teams. Leicester City had 1 in 3 odds to get kicked out of the Premier League. They had 5,000 to 1 odds to win it. While I am going to focus the majority of this segment on Leicester City as a whole, I do want to look at the players themselves, who they were. And Leicester City had a few really notable ones, the first of which was Jamie Vardy. He was a speedy striker who was great on the counterattack. To set him up was Riyad Mahrez, a right winger. He was the tactician of this team. In the back was N'Golo Kante. He played defensive midfield and intercepted almost anything that came his way. In the goal was Kasper Schmeichel, who was a pretty good goalkeeper. Nothing too special, but he also had a career year this season. There are lots of other players as well, but those are just the main notable characters here. When the first weekend of the Premier League season arrived, Leicester City beat Sunderland at home 4-2. They then beat West Ham 2-1. Tottenham Hotspur, supposed to be one of the best teams in the league, had a draw with Leicester in week 3. They then drew with Bournemouth and then beat Aston Villa. By this time, you would think the odds shift just a little bit from 5,000 to 1 to maybe something a little bit more reasonable, at least after not losing in the first 5 weeks of the season. But no, 5,000 to 1 odds still remain for Leicester City. They would lose to Arsenal 5-2 in the next weekend, and then they'd go on a 9-game streak without having lost a game before they played Liverpool, losing 1-0. By this time, the odds makers had finally shifted. Leicester City now had 10-1 odds despite leading the entire league. In February, things finally shifted and Leicester were the title favorites. They led the Premier League 53 points to Spurs 48, followed by Manchester City and Arsenal. It was almost like an NBA team, one that was clearly outmatched, one that clearly was out of their league, fighting, defending, scrapping their way to the finish line, which they would eventually cross in first place with room to spare. A league that was once dominated by money, by fame, had been won by a team that didn't have any of that. Leicester City had done something remarkable, something that had pretty much never been done across the entire history of sport. They had managed to surpass any and all expectations regardless of how low or high the preseason standard was for them. Leicester City were champions. They had done something for their fans that they would remember forever. That's what makes the one-hit wonder so special. It's about what you can give to your fans. It's about what people take away from your performances, not necessarily the negative connotation that comes after the fact. People remember David Tyree. People remember Peyton Hillis. People remember Jeremy Lin. And people will definitely remember Leicester City. Greatness comes in different ways for many different people. Some get it great. They get prolonged success. For others, it's not as sustained. They only get it for a limited amount of time. Whether it's the pressure of expectations or an injury that's out of their control, the one-hit wonder is something that you will never know until it goes away. Hey everybody, I appreciate the support over the past few weeks, especially for the Rodman video. If you would like to support the channel further, I've created a Patreon for early access to episodes as well as some behind the scenes stuff. Big thank you to Brian for making a few of the songs featured in this video, and please like, subscribe, comment, that sort of deal. Appreciate everybody for the support, and hopefully I've got more content on the way soon. Hope you enjoyed.